Amoral Minds. I'm your host, RJ Roger. And what we're going to talk about today is a theory from my book, The Don 36 Rules of the Bosses. And we're going to focus specifically on the opening section, the five epics of the bosses. And for the purpose of this show, we're going to focus on Epic 3, Boss. This is the senior rank. This is when you have risen to the high mark of your selected field. All right. Boss is when you're no longer working in your field, you are influencing your field. You have control in your field. You're not taking orders, you're giving orders. You're not following rules, you're setting rules. You set the agenda. Now, very important to never confuse maid and boss. These are both good times on the pursuit of power. Maid is a great time. Money's not so worried about. Influence, you do have a little bit of it. You have a group of people who you're responsible for. The boss chose you to handle them for you. They come to you, they ask you questions. You approve or disapprove. He can't go to the boss without going through you. Um, but never confuse maid with boss. Maid is a fake boss. He is a manager within the boss's organization. He owns nothing. He Everything he manages is owned by the boss. Maid is a powerless, enslaved, owned person. It is a person who is owned by the boss. So, how does it work? How do you get there? How does somebody rise to a place in life where everything that you want to do, you can do? Where you have complete dominance and influence and control within your field? What type of mindset does that take? A boss does not think in the confines of the commonor, the common everyday Joe Sixpack man. A boss does not think how he thinks. A boss is only concerned with power, personal gain, wealth, stature, influence. They are typically amoral people, not immoral or moral. They are unconcerned with morality, ethics, right and wrong. It would be very harmful to society if I were to do X or Y. No, that is not how a boss thinks. A boss thinks in terms of achieving the end goal. They see people as objects, as pieces on a board that are strategically moved to help achieve the goal. They don't feel guilt. They don't feel shame. One of their greatest talents is in justification. They can come up with a reason for a plausible explanation for whatever it is that they do wrong. You don't make it to boss by means of compassion. Now, a great example of this is music executive Berry Gordy, founder of Motown Records. Came of age in Detroit during the civil rights era. Berry Gordy, little about Berry Gordy. He brought some of the most pioneering music to the world, dominated the 60s and 70s, launched many, many acts. I could take the whole show just listing names of pop records that he produced and released, and major artists. Some of those artists are Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, the Jackson 5, Smokey Robinson, Etta James, Rick James, Gladys Knight, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Now, Berry Gordy, boss, right? You would think that a guy that came up under, a black guy that came up under the civil rights era, seen so many businesses destroyed by the Detroit riots, In his early career, before he started Motown, when he was working as a music executive for a record company, he was stiffed out of monies that he was owed, paid a low royalty, treated unfairly by the company. So you might think to yourself, this is a guy that probably cares. He's working with all black artists, has a record company because of what happened to him, because of how black people were historically treated by record companies. Barry Gordy is going to treat us right. That's what you would think. That Barry Gordy should care about his artists, should care about his business practices. No. Barry Gordy's business practices were called into question by many of the artists that have worked with him. I read an article that talked about right now there's a popular type of contract that you find in the music business. It's called the 360 deal. So anyone that doesn't know what a 360 deal is, that's essentially where whatever field you're in. Take me, for example. I'm a writer. So let's say I sign a deal with a publishing company. Their only specialty that they have is in producing books, right? And they can help me with that and do a good job, so they can reasonably expect to take half the profits or split profits with me, and they are deserving of some of that because they're helping me. But let's say the book publisher says, hey, I want a piece of your appearances. I want a piece of your merchandise. I want a piece of your media. If you're doing podcasts and things like that, that would be like a 360 deal. All they are helping me with is publishing a book, but they're taking from various other pieces of things that I create under the guise that they think, well, we made you, so we should get a piece of everything. That's a 360 deal, commonly found in today's music business. But before it was popular or even a real thing, Barry Gordy was essentially the originator of the 360 deal. Artists had no control. He controlled all aspects of music production, paid very low royalties. Sometimes he didn't pay his artists at all. He was very controversial contract that he offered to the Jackson 5, where he was offering them less than 3% royalties. He owned all publishing, masters, was taking a piece of touring, merchandise, appearances. Many of his artists ended up on drugs, broke. Some of them committed suicide. They were manipulated, fell into depressions. They were exploited and mistreated. And he really took advantage of the desperation and hunger of aspiring artists. Justification. Talked about this a little earlier. Justification. That is something that I find common in most, if not all, powerful, high-ranked people. One of the rules of the bosses that I talk about in my book, The Don, Rule 27, the end justifies the means. Barry Gordy and most top executives in the music business and most top executives in general live and die by this principle. Rule 27, the end justifies the means. History will not stutter over the means by which one has risen. For a man is not remembered for the trail of broken souls that line his yesterdays, but rather the great many works that survive his tomorrows. If in your times you have risen to boss, you have toasted with Frank Sinatra and collected all the monies, of what matter is it that you have killed many men and ruined the lives of all? History will remember you for your feats, not the slew of men who have perished along the way. So the point of all of this, Barry Gordy doesn't care. The world doesn't care. Motown Records will go down as the greatest independent music company of all time. Barry Gordy will be remembered as the greatest music executive to ever live. In life, feats, accomplishments, success always is remembered longer than misdeeds. And in the end, who gives a damn about a crying artist anyway? I'm RJ Roger. This is Amoral Minds. I got a great book coming out, The Don. It'll be in stores this fall. Please support the book when it hits stores. Peace and love, and I'll see you next week.